leads us to our next question. How does greed affect late modern organizations, and in particular leadership in late modern organizations? Organizational leadership is a complex phenomenon. In this chapter, I will depart from Gary Uckel and Richard Leipziger's assumption that all forms of organizational leadership have at least three essential and interrelated behavioral dimensions: visionary and change-oriented leadership, efficiency and task-oriented leadership, and people and relations-oriented leadership. Their model of visionary and change-oriented leadership includes innovative thinking and, one might add, entrepreneurship. For Uckel and Leipziger, change is primarily a matter of adapting to the external environment. In other words, somewhat simplified, one might suggest that in this model, organizational vision seems to be profit-seeking responses to changes in the organization's context. Elsewhere, I have suggested that this is an insufficient understanding of visionary leadership, since visions also need a moral horizon. Yet, at the same time, it is worth noticing that most late modern organization functions in various degrees within the context of market economies. It is also obvious that many non-for-profit organizations rely on donors who earn their money in the marketplace. This is an important detection, since the moral condemnation of greed finds itself confronted by intelligent critique when it comes to understanding markets and market economy. Not only the Wall Street caricature Gordon Gekko, but also capable philosophers like Ayn Rand and several Nobel Prize-winning economists like Milton Friedman go far as suggesting that greed in fact may be good, because it may generate productivity, investment, and innovation. Even David Hume argued that greed was the spur of industry. It is beyond my competence and the scope of this study to provide an exhaustive discussion of whether this is empirically correct. I think that it seems reasonable to argue that greed may spur investment, innovation, and entrepreneurship. However, at the same time, it is also clear that undisciplined greed may produce economic setbacks. Several economic theorists argue that the financial recession in 2007 was caused by infectious greed and a history of insufficient regulations of markets. Thus, although markets to some degree are capable of channeling greed to the benefit of others, it is concurrently clear that unregulated greed can be exceedingly dysfunctional, as demonstrated in cases like the Enron scandal. More importantly, J. Richards has convincingly showed that markets do not depend upon extreme greed as a necessary systemic condition. Risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and visionary thinking can be sufficiently motivated by what I have called responsible self-interest, or by ethical ambitions that spur social entrepreneurship. This is exemplified by Grameen Bank and Professor Michael Yunus, who argue that social goals can replace greed as a powerful motivational force. This is also exemplified by the religiously motivated entrepreneurs like the Haugen movement in my own country, Norway, who viewed investment and entrepreneurship as part of their divine calling to be good stewards and provide work for the poor. This also seems to imply that there are ethical forms of bold possibility thinking, and that it is a mistake to consider any form of hairy goals or big thinking as forms of greed. From a theological perspective, one might suggest that visionary thinking is a part of man's calling to live creatively in the image of the Creator. Yet, it is also clear that such thinking may slip into greed if it's not checked against moral criteria. Visionary thinking should therefore be disciplined by moral principles and a reflective framework capable of answering questions as to how growth in one's own organization will affect other social systems. Such questions seem to be even more relevant at the level of strategic execution, where results and consequences are not only anticipated but also begin to appear. Charles Handy provides a number of interesting examples on how new and in a narrow perspective, successful organizational strategies often have produced unintended consequences in terms of dumping dirt on its surroundings. Greed may tempt leaders to turn their back to the social responsibility of dealing with these consequences and leave these problems to the general public. However, greedy strategizing may also threaten one's own organization. In a recent study, Gary Collins argued that even great companies may fall if they engage in what he calls an undisciplined pursuit of more. This pursuit is initiated by a kind of hybris that follows from success and manifests in growth strategies which compromises the organization's core values. As an example, Collins presents Hewlett-Packard, which was built on the principle of getting the right people in the right place, or what Collins earlier has defined as Packard's law. No company can grow its revenues consistently faster than its ability to get enough of the right people to implement that growth. Yet, Collins shows that Hewlett-Packard actually started to violate this law as they faced new opportunities for faster growth. The undisciplined pursuit of more may also inspire undisciplined expansion and discontinuous leaps into new domains beyond the organization's core competence. Lack of innovation was not actually a problem in their organization's Collins study. It was rather undisciplined initiatives that stretched people and systems beyond their capabilities. Collins also shows that this in turn created a bias for short-term strategies and quick fix solutions that compromise further key strategic principles, with the consequence that the organization entered into a downward spiral. Another example of what one might call greedy strategies is the erosion of cost control, which means one allows oneself to increase prices and revenues rather than increasing cost discipline, with the result that one may lose market shares in the long run. Collins also found that leaders who engage in such undertakings have a tendency to place their personal interests above organizational health. Greed may be manifested in terms of undisciplined salaries, or what Collins calls the personal pursuit of more money, more privileges, more fame. It's worth noticing that this is more than a question of personal integrity. It also raises questions about the incentive system of the organization. Charles Sandy suggests that leaders at the top have a particular responsibility of putting moral change upon their appetite. But questions about where self-interest shade into greed are obviously relevant at all levels of the organization. This is particularly relevant in organizations that rely mainly on monetary incentive systems and on a significant degree of internal competition. Such systems does not rely on self-interest but also produces or reinforces greed and opportunistic behavior. This seems to imply that this form of transactional leadership should be balanced by morally transforming leadership that also nurtures team spirit and solidarity.